The biggest agricultural exhibition in Africa, the NAMPO Harvest Day 2025, is currently underway. Our Ziniko Mhlaba is there. Ziniko, good morning. The Agriculture Minister John Steenhuisen is going to be giving the keynote there today. It's interesting just hearing messages from various government representatives around some of the hottest topics where you are, around expropriation and so on, almost doubled down on the government line in a way. So it will be something to look forward to, the sentiments that John Steenhuisen shares with the grouping there today. What's expected?
That is correct, Iman. The minister has been on a series of engagements with the agricultural sector for the past few weeks. However, this week his focus has been happening at what is happening here at Bothaville in the Free State. The minister is joining me now just to get a sense of what is it that he is getting from the ground, from his stakeholders on the ground in the agricultural sector, but also know that there's that very important visit by the president to the United States. So it will be interesting then to see and hear what the sector has told the minister as one of their agenda, when it comes to the president taking the South African agenda to the U.S. Minister, thank you very much for your time. Firstly, what have you found on the ground in terms of the key challenges? There's been a lot of talk on the ground, expressions by the sector in terms of their challenges, their problems, their concerns. In summary, what are the key things that are coming out?
I think there are a number of key things. I mean, topping the list of always is safety and security. We've got issues in our rural areas with crime and criminality, targeting farmers and farm workers. And obviously, as my stakeholders in the Department of Agriculture, their safety and security is paramount. But there are also some other concerns. There's obviously the tariff issue in the United States, but also on the local front, road infrastructure has been a big point that a lot of made deterioration of roads, the damage it does to both vehicles, equipment, and also to the product being able to get to market. And then, of course, things like bottlenecks at ports, which inhibit the ability to be able to access international markets. So these are just some of the things that have been raised here. But overall, there's been a really buoyant, positive vibe here. The mood on the ground is very good, and I think that's also reflected in the Agricultural Confidence Index, which is up. With the latest economic figures that have come out, which showed that agriculture has grown in the last quarter and contributed to economic growth and jobs, and I'm very proud of that.
The president is going to the U.S. I'm not sure if you will join him there, but what are the 2-3 things that you like the president to take to the U.S. in terms of your own portfolio, the agricultural sector?
We have to avoid at all costs a 30% tariff. It'll make South African agricultural products absolutely unaffordable and uncompetitive in that market. So we would like to have the free access. I think it's also a very good opportunity for President Ramaphosa to be able to meet with his counterpart to dispel some of the myths and misinformation that have been whispered in his ear about South Africa. Things like a genocide. There's no genocide in South Africa. Things like mass expropriation without compensation. There's not a single farm that's been expropriated without compensation in South Africa. Yes, we have some issues with crime and criminality, but these affect all of our citizens in the same way. And so what we need to do is to make sure that when important trading partners like the US are making decisions around their outlook, their trade, their positioning, that they're making it based on the facts and not the fiction. And I think that's going to be very, very important. And then, of course, I want more market access for South African agricultural goods. Currently, we can only get citrus into the US from the Western Cape and I think it's Limpopo. That means that 85% of the rest of our citrus production doesn't have exposure. I'd like to change that.
In your engagements with the agricultural sector, following the 49 people left for the U.S., what are the general farmers saying on the ground in terms of that, those concerns raised by those 49 individuals? Are they sharing the same sentiments? How do they feel about that incident and generally the idea of living in South Africa?
Well, I think that certainly everyone I've spoken to over the last few days and here at NAMPO have, of course, expressed some of these concerns, and we've traversed some of those already. But what I have seen is them committed to staying here and fixing those things and being part of the future and part of the solutions here. I think that we can't determine where people live and what their life choices are. That's for them to make. I happen to think that they've made a mistake. I think we're on the cusp of great things here in South Africa with new government, with new energy, with new growth initiatives. And I think that South Africa is going to start to take off in a major way. And it's going to become the envy of the world in many respects. But my focus is not on those people who've left. My focus as the Minister of Agriculture on those farmers and farm workers and people in the agri-space that have chosen, like me, to stay here and make a difference. And they're going to get my full attention and focus and support over the coming time while I'm Minister.
I mean, our own engagement with some of the farmers here, one of the things there is the issue of uncertainty when it comes to policies relating to the Land Expropriation Act. The Minister, your colleague in Cabinet, Minister McPherson, did try to really explain to them that actually this is not such a bad idea, even though they might have concerns. What is your sense in terms of, are they getting the message that the government is trying to send to them in terms of clarifying the importance of the Expropriation Act, but also in the modality in which it should be achieved in?
Yes, I think that, look, I mean, I think that we need to be very clear that, every country in the world has expropriation acts, but it's used in the interest of public purpose. And I think that the flaw with the current bill is that it's got a sequencing problem, and it places the onus from a legal perspective on the expropriatee, not the expropriator. And I think that property rights are the bedrock of any foundational democracy and any flourishing economy. If you have a look at the most successful economies in the world, property rights are there. I think it is important to tell people in the space that Section 25 of the Constitution remains intact. Section 25 guarantees people the right to own property and not to have that property arbitrarily deprived, to be deprived of that property. And so those constitutional safeguards are there. As you know, the Expropriation Act is a subject now of a court process, and I think the court will express itself on this particular piece of legislation. And I think that some of the elements of it are incredibly clumsy and ill-considered, and hopefully we'll be able to have an opportunity to correct that. But certainly from my perspective, there's no intention that I've seen from any level of government to now embark upon a Zimbabwe-style mass expropriation of properties. Quite the opposite. I think the President visiting NAMPO, I think the Deputy President visiting NAMPO is a very clear signal that we as a government regard the agricultural sector as vitally important for South Africa, and we want to give as much certainty now to the sector so they can get on with the business that they're expert in, which is growing crops, food and animals to feed us and to help drive our exports.
Lastly, let's bring it home. We are dealing with the budget next week. Your sector has been complaining about underfunding. Generally, what are your expectations when it comes to the budget that will be delivered next week for your sector and generally maybe as the leader of the DA?
Well, look, I think that we're in a tight fiscal spot and we must understand that. I think years of previous bad decisions have started to be felt now in terms of our inability to borrow more, the fiscal constraints, and of course the big growth problem that we have in South Africa. Our economy is not growing fast enough, and that then has to become the number one priority, not of the Treasury, but of the entire government. How do we grow the economy? How do we create more jobs? And every minister should be held accountable in their own sector for what they're doing to grow the economy and create jobs using the leverage in their sector. I'm comfortable with the budget that my department has received. Of course, I don't think you'll ever find a minister who says, I've got enough money. We always want more. There's always more demands. There's always more projects we can do. But I think what Minister Gondongwana has succeeded in doing is a very good balancing act. And I think we're going to see a budget that will pass the House quite easily, and we can then get on the process of building the economy.
So you are happy, you are ready to support the budget by next week?
Well, we have to see it in its final form, but certainly what I've seen to date, I'm incredibly comfortable with, and I think that Minister Gondongwana, as I said, has done a really effective balancing act that will see no extra borrowing and no extra taxation on an already burdened sector, no VAT increase, so that our people can breathe that sigh of relief. And I think that it's a sign that the government has listened to what the people have said, and we now have a budget that I think will it's never going to satisfy everybody, but I think it's a good start now for us to have a platform to start growing the economy, so we don't end up fighting over who's going to get taxed more, who's getting cut, and how we're going to spend. We're going to be focusing on what we do with the extra revenue that comes through with the economic growth that we hope we can stimulate.
Minister, thank you very much for your
Thank you
time.
very,
We
very
appreciate
much.
it.
Thank you so much. Great to be with you again.
Thank you, sir. That's the Minister of Agriculture, Mr. John Steenhuisen, giving us some insights in terms of, their own agenda as the agricultural sector, as we will be having the president of the country heading off to the US, but also giving us some of his opinions and insights when it comes to the much anticipated budget set to be delivered by Mr. Enoch Godongwana next week. That's where we are. Now we'll be stepping out onto the fields to engage with more locals on the ground and some farmers.